pictures, and you see little balls. Those balls are called plasma. Plasma is the same thing that causes sunspots on the sun. When a C4 detonation takes place, you have plasma balls that are formed throughout the building. These are electromagnetic eddies that are created. Anything within a plasma ball will not be affected by the 6.3 coefficient of expansion of a C4 detonation, which only affects concrete, steel, and glass. So at this exact second, when this building is exposed to this, you have all these heavy chunks of steel in here, but they're also subject to the change in the gravity well. The gravity well collapses in 4.8 seconds, pulling the entire debris field right into a real nice pile in the basement. One thing that they didn't tell you was there was 8 buildings, 40 stories tall, that surround the World Trade Center that all fell down, that were caught inside the electromagnetic bubble. They weren't on fire, but they all collapsed just the same with the World Trade Center because they were inside the electromagnetic pulse of the C4 detonation. So plastic affected plastic and pulled this whole thing down into a nice, neat pile. Now, if you look at the video, you'll see that here's Long Island, here's the World Trade Center, and here's a big white cloud of asbestos. The entire World Trade Center is insulated with asbestos. 50,000 people a day work in the World Trade Center. 50,000 people for 30 years exposed to asbestos insulation. Anybody want to guess at what the lawsuits would be worth over a 30-year period? In the trillions of dollars against the United States government. Who owns the World Trade Center? New York City Port Authorities. Who owns the New York City Port Authorities? United States Department of Transportation. Who is owned by the United States Postal Service? Who owns the Treasury? Who owns the Pentagon? Who owns the military? Jeez, it's all kind of coming back to roast on the Treasury, on the post office, isn't it? So now you've got this big cloud of asbestos, and 3 million New Yorkers are exposed to raw asbestos that's just been blasted away into real nice fine particles by 85,000 pound per square inch blast wave. Coefficient of expansion of asbestos is not 6.3. It's only blown into a free atmosphere, not into an atom format. So therefore, this here becomes a death trap for everyone exposed. Now, 50,000 people a day work, but only 3,850 people were in the building because everybody was told to stay home. Both planes, when you run the video back and you look at them, did not have windows. They were drones. Where did all the people go that supposedly left Boston? Never heard from again. Out into the Atlantic and ditched. And this was a controlled issue by drones. And we have drone technology. There's over 12,000 drones in Iraq right now. So these things, liars figure. But this little number here, figures don't lie. And being a heat treat specialist with a nuclear background can tell you that this was created by 186 men of special forces who deal with demolition. The basement of the World Trade Center was blasted out. What do you think's below the World Trade Center? Heavy rails called the subway system. They blew the basement floors out and dumped all the gold onto the subway rails, and they disappeared. Not to be found yet. Somewhere. That was the World Bank of the United States, controlled by the United States Postal Service. But the gold, that was only $3.4 billion. At the exact point of detonation, $12 trillion was transferred through Honolulu, Hawaii substation into Singapore Bank in Singapore, world's largest bank, which can accept a deposit. How much money does it cost to conduct a war in Afghanistan and Iraq? $500 billion a year. There's a 22-year supply of money to keep the war going in the Middle East and keep us in Asia. How much oil do they have left in the Middle East? 20 years. Keep the oil running for 20 years and the money to play for it. Cover up the asbestos under active war. Dress a bunch of guys up in rags and call them terrorists. Give us a patriot bill. Take away our freedoms. put us through all the nonsense at the airport, even take away your clippers out of your luggage so you can't get on a plane, but they give you a steel knife and fork in first class. Now go figure that one. I kid you not, folks. I'm a 1400 flight flyer. So the plasma balls protect the steel and concrete, which are then analyzed to be 100% metallurgically correct, except both buildings are missing 50,000 tons of matter, which floated away in the cloud as atoms of smoke on the wind. You know, everybody caught in the cloud is now dying of lung cancer. But because this is an act of war, they can't sue for medical help from the United States Social Security Service. And what did the United States do? They sued to give up protect your freedoms, to join the United States of America Corporation and go into a guise, G-O-I-S-E, of protection and give up all your civil rights. Now, mandamus has been canceled because it's written in adverb verb. Your freedoms, as far as having a warrant to enter search warrants, have been nullified because the laws are written in adverb verb. They're using my technology to disqualify all the protections you had, and PRO means no of Texas contract, all the no contracts you had. And they're only selectively choosing the ones that they want to use that benefit them in their ability to control, and Big Brother is watching. At every traffic intersection you have a camera, videos. How many people got tickets already from video cameras at stoplights? I got a few of them myself.
So who's Big Brother?
Who's Big Brother? DOT, Department of Transportation, working for the post office.
Is that where the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes in?
Under the post office.
Under the post office.
Yep, and you guys are all farmers, so you're under... In other words, to own a farm today, you have to have a 4-year college degree in horticulture. You have to understand pesticides, groundwater, public safety, pollution, gasoline, if your tractor's leaking, anything you put on the ground goes into the water table. Therefore, it affects public safety underwater. I used to own a 40-acre plot of land, and I bought it because I was going to harvest the topsoil, which was worth $7.5 million on my 40 acres, until I took a course at the DNR in Wisconsin and found out that this was the first line of defense to supply water to over 10,000 homes within 100 square miles of my land, as that was the headwaters of the Mud River. And I got an education as to how important my land was and that it could never be touched because it filtered water and created pure water in the underground water system. And I respected that because I'm a green person. So, now you know what happened here. This was a condition. Oklahoma was number 1. Waco was number 2. Well, Waco was first, then Oklahoma, and then this one. Just like World War II was allowed to take place, bombing of Pearl Harbor, you need a crime big enough so that people yell rape. This was a crime big enough to suspend your rights and make everybody a victim of terror. Question?
Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what was that control to?
What?
Population control in World War II?
For what?
For Hiroshima and Nagasaki when the A-bomb was dropped?
Okay, in World War II, all the bombs dropped in Pearl Harbor had $1 airmail stamps put on them just to make it legal to deliver the postage to the Postmaster General of Honolulu, Hawaii on December 7, 1941. In 1945, a $1 airmail stamp was placed on Little Boy and Fat Boy and delivered to Hiroshima and Nagasaki airmail just to make it legal. And I have the video at home that shows the Postmaster General of Honolulu, Hawaii on signing his name across the $1 postage stamp, just like I sign my name across the $1 postage stamp on my lawsuits, just to make it legal to deliver the mail. All the bombs that were unexploded And I talked with one of the survivors in Honolulu, Hawaii, who had a 500-pound bomb dropped and split a tree in front of his house. And the bomb had a $1 postage stamp on it when I asked him about it. He goes like, yeah, it was $1 Japanese postage stamp signed right on there. He says, thought it was kind of peculiar. He says, the Army Corps of Engineering came out and defused the bomb, took it away. But it did have the $1 postage stamp on it, he said. And he was an eyewitness. So, yes?
What is the significance of the $1 versus, let's say...
There are no fractions in federal law. Everything is a whole number. That's your answer.
So
That's
you
what.
can't use a 2-cent stamp.
No, you must use a $1 stamp or above. Must always be a whole number. Now, that's a good question. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. When you read, now, you've been exposed to fiction grammar, but there's another thing that you don't see. It's called character spaces. All things went to computer now. No, wait, that's, yeah. My spacing is wrong. Okay, you're looking at a computer, and each one of these represent a character space, okay? Now there's a rule in syntax, it's called the double space rule. If you were 2 spaces between words, you break the continuance of evidence, okay? Now here you're going along, you got space, 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 1/10, full space. This is actually 2 spaces now. So when you say, I saw the cat, this is an adverb verb, but there's 2 spaces missing here. So therefore, this is just a 2-word phrase, and this is a 2-word phrase. It's not 4 words. So therefore, watch your spacing. We have an attorney in Petersburg, Alaska, who uses 4 words, single-spaced, 3 words, double-spaced in each sentence for 22 years. Last year, I caught him. We went back and looked at everything he wrote in 22 years, all identical. 4 and 3 on every sentence. Never wrote a legal contract in his entire life. And he was the prosecuting attorney and working for the city in Petersburg, Alaska, never lost a case. But then again, he never had a correct case, and so him and the judge were in and on together. Therefore, it's a conspiracy.
He knew what he was doing.
Exactly. There was no mistakes there. Wow. When I take your mortgage contracts and I identify all the parts of speech in 15 pages, and I show that there's not a single prepositional phrase, that this is a document with 5,000 syntax wrong words and 1,000 words that mean no contract, and therefore you have 6,000 mistakes in 5,000 words. This is like building a space shuttle to go to the moon. It's an engineering exercise on 64 million mortgages. When Lloyd's of London got a copy of this, they canceled 64 million title insurance policies in the United States. If I'm blowing smoke, then what's the world doing canceling the United States contracts across the board? shutting down the mortgage industry. And as Pandora, yes, I'm responsible personally for the entire collapse of the mortgage industry and why all of you are probably in foreclosure right now.
What does Bernanke steal of $40 billion per month?
$40 billion, that's nothing.
But is that tied to this mortgage, to the sin taxing thing?
No, he's just trying to put a Band-Aid on something, saying we're going to buy up all your bad paper. Now, for the mortgage people, and this goes with that. Here's how the plan works. We have a document that's a fraud. And this is an autograph, this is a confession. As you know, the bank did not sign any of your mortgages. So therefore, you have what's called a unilateral contract, meaning one signer, which means it's not a contract. You are classified as a borrower or a trustor, ending the word in OR, making you responsible for what? A contract that's written in adverb verb and says nothing. You are responsible to pay back money to a contract that doesn't exist. All the money listed on the document is in a parentheses. So if we have quotation marks, a parentheses, square brackets, or we write in italics. Kind of bad. Or if we write on an angle called italics, it means it's removed from the paper and it's blank, which is the condition of all your cases. All right, so we have this document here, and this document says that the bank wants this from you. But he never signed it. So can I prosecute this individual? Well, I don't have a victim yet. You guys have become victims, but only after the fact. Those that are all current in your mortgage payments, you still are sitting on bad paper, but nobody's taking responsibility for it. You've paid, kept your mouth shut, the bank's kept their mouth shut, and you just keep paying. Well, that's cool. Your credit rating reflects that you have made a promise to give something back to somebody else, and you've kept your promise. It's just like a handshake. There's no written contract. This is not a written contract either, until I stand up in front of the court. Now, when the bank stands up in front of the court and says, I wrote this, I'm taking responsibility, I want that house, I now have a signed confession in front of a judge that they took responsibility. Now, it's my responsibility under Title 42, 1986, as a federal judge, to syntax this document and find out what it really says. What it really says is that the false misleading information, fictitious conveyance of grammar, perjury, and deprivation of rights under coloring of the law was now a condition of criminal activity under Title 42, 1986, while engaged in criminal activity. Under Title 42, 1986, he had knowledge because there's 6,000 mistakes without any kind of modification. In other words, it's a perfect fraud. A perfect fraud because we're back into the no law or fact. And so now he's got this no law or fact document that he's confessed to. Well, from the first one that we did in January of 2008, which collapsed the entire mortgage industry and took the stock market from 14,000 down to 6 and back up again, and put everybody into your quandrum, why hasn't the bank foreclosed you after 90 days? Why didn't they just come out with the sheriff and kick you off the land? Well, that's because we still hadn't had the bankers stand up and say, I did this. So when he did that, he now had what he did was on the 90th day, he filed a Title 46, Chapter 16, Section 781 salvage claim on your land. They killed the Indians, they stole the land, they sold it to an unsuspecting buyer back in 1800, and it hasn't been, or 1834, and hasn't been corrected to this date, and so the word is ailing, A-I-L-I-N-G. Comes from the word failing, with a square bracket around it. better known as the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 12b-6. Now, every one of you that have ever worked with me, the first thing that the lawyer does is he failed to state a claim. Okay, what that says is pronoun, adverb, future time, verb, adverb, verb, which means you didn't use a verb in your document. You actually sued them with correct facts, using forensic evidence with a signed confession from the bank who stood up and said, I wrote this. Now, I have permission as a federal judge under Title 42, 1986 to prosecute this individual for false misleading information. So, all the people that have filed these lawsuits since January 2008, they're stonewalled. We want more information. We want interrogatories. We want affidavits. We want a smoking gun. We want. The point is, the word interrogatory, INT, means no contract. Affidavit, AFF, vowel two consonants, means no contract. We want no contract. We want you to participate in nonsense for 3.5 years of no contract to keep you into a verb fiction, which means as long as you say nothing about nothing, you can't prosecute nothing with nothing. Which part of no don't you understand, the N or the O? Okay. Now that this fraud has been perpetrated, we go ahead and say, well, I have the signed confession here, and the bank won't settle, and the court won't settle. They're going like, well, the lawyers all on both sides want more and more information. Well, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in California, they said, well, we've got to find out who wrote this. I says, well, first off, this is owned by a corporation. A corporation is a dead entity, just like this piece of paper is a dead entity, is a vessel in dry dock. Even though you have a president and a vice president, a director of a corporation, who is this individual? He is not a living, thinking entity. He is a corporate trustee. Trustees are created by paper documents. There is no living person to look at. You only have a machine run by a set of rules and regulations. That machine creates the trustee and tells the trustee what to do. But all the language is written in fiction. So what is the subjective interpretation of nothing? Well, at some point here, we have to come to a settlement. So how do we get these people how do we get the machine, the corporation, to sit down and confess to a U.S. Attorney's Office that, yeah, we're responsible, yeah, this was engineered as a lie, yeah, somebody's got to pay. Well, the fine is $25 million times 64 million homes. That's $400 trillion. That's pretty big check to write. The United States Treasury is $17 trillion in debt. United States Treasury might be $17 trillion in debt, but the United States banking industry has stolen $700 trillion from the United States Treasury in the last 84 years. So what do they do with all that money? Where's it sitting? Well, it's sitting offshore. It's sitting in trusts. It's accumulating interest. And the bank owes the United States government $400 trillion. That's according to just for the mortgages. That's only for 64 million mortgages. That's not counting all the industry, corporations, licensing bureaus, Department of Transportation, and everything else. So this is a really big number, probably $1,000 trillion. Point is, we're only going to deal with the mortgages right now. So I said to the bank, I says, well, the U.S. Attorney says we can't get past, we've been in court 3.5 years now, and we can't move forward. They want more and more and more information. I says, all right, would you like me to settle this? The guy says, no one's been able to settle it. What are we going to do? I says, I'll fix it. So I made a deal with Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citibank. Brought all the boys in, sat down and said, hey, you know, guys, you wrote this. I syntaxed it. I have a signed confession in my hand. He says, well, we didn't sign it. There's no signature under. I says, yeah, but you stood up in court and you held it up and said, I want your house. When you did that, you confessed. And I've got all of your confessions. Because after all, I have a lawsuit that says here you want their house for not paying the bill. So therefore, you held this up and confessed to it. Now I have a signature signed in front of a judge, and now you're liable.